Hello viewers, in this episode we are discussing on tourism in ancient period under following 5 subheadings. They are Introduction, Tourism in ancient Rome and Greece, Early travel by oceans and roads, Tourism in ancient India and Tourism in ancient China. Always man has been moving from place to place in search of food, shelter and safety. Paleolithic evidence suggests that given a right environment, man prefers to live in one place. During a million years ago, changes in climate, dwindling food supplies or hostile invaders made the people to leave their homes to refugees elsewhere. The Aryans left their homes in Central Asia due to climatic changes and non-availability of sufficient food. Perhaps it was the invention of wheel about 5000 years ago which made travel easy. The Phoenicians were probably the first real travelers in the modern sense, as they went from place to place as travelers and traders. Almost at the same time, trade and travel developed in India, where the wheels and money were introduced during Mohenjo Daro civilization about 4000 years ago. The practice of travel were the oldest tradition in the world, the motives being religion and trade. The great sages of ancient times went to Himalayas to meditate and set up their ashram, which were centers of learning. Most of the early travels were not for purpose of pleasure. The primary motive was related to trade, commerce. However, there were another type of travelers whose motive was to make pilgrimage. The urge to explore new land and to seek new knowledge was another motive of early travelers. Homer's great work, Odyssey, records the wanderlust of ancient Greeks and Romans. There are innumerable references to great explorers who spent many years of their lives in search of new knowledge. These great explorers perhaps can be credited with the distinction of being the pioneers who subsequently paved the way for the modern tourism. The invention of money by Sumerians, they are the Babylonians, and development of trade in 4000 BC may be traced to the beginning of travel. Not only Sumerians were the first to grasp the idea of money and use it in business transactions, but also they were first to invent cuneiform writing and the wheel. So, they should be credited as the founders of the travel business. 5000 years ago, cruises were organized and conducted from Egypt. Probably the first journey ever made for the purpose of peace and tourism was made by Queen Hatshepsut to the land of Punt, which is on the east coast of Africa. In 1480 BC, description of their tour has been recorded on the walls of temple of Deir el-Bahri at Luxor. These texts and bas-reliefs are among the world's rarest artwork. These works are universally admired for their wondrous beauty and artistic qualities. The Colossi of Memnonat Thebes have on their pedestals the names of Greek tourists of the 5th century BC. According to Chambers' Encyclopedia, in ancient Greek world, there is a evidence of tourist traffic, particularly for the Olympic game and other festivals. The attitude of thinker varied. Mr. Aristotle Plato was hostile to travel. He laid down in the law that no one was to be allowed to travel to a foreign country who was under 40 years of age. Others may be allowed only when they are on public mission. But Mr. Xenophon, the author of Athenian Constitution, recognized the contribution made by foreign residents and visitors to the prosperity of Athens in 4th century BC. Xenophon recommended that the state should devote money to the buildings of hotels. Interestingly, under the Roman Empire, with its law and order and its excellent land and sea communications, tourist traffic attained such a volume that were not to be seen until the modern era. Foreigners visited Rome from all parts of the world. Similarly, Roman tourists streamed overseas, mostly along with defined routes. Their principal motives were the study of art and legend in Greece. As early as 3rd millennium BC, Egypt was a popular place for tourism. The Babylonian king Shulgi, who ruled Ur 4000 years ago, is said to have boasted that he constructed roads, built gardens and rest houses for respectable travelers. The Bible describes these ideas in the following words: "Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased." The ancient Greeks travelled short distance in small boats. Jason and legendary Argonauts built a large ship to search for a golden fleece, undaunted by dangers described in Homer's Odyssey. Herodotus in 5th century toured Pheonicia, Egypt, Cyrenaica, Greece and Black Sea areas. He recorded the customs, traditions and practices of the people living in these areas. Philosophers Thales, Pythagoras and Plato all travelled to Egypt. Aristotle Plato visited Asia Minor before starting his peripatetic school for wandering students. Greeks travelled to festivals, spas, athletic meets and to consult the oracle at Delphi and the Asclepiads at Epidaurus. They travelled by mules and carts and stayed at wayside inns. A chapter in one of the works of that time asks for the eating houses and hotels where there are the fewest bugs. Second subheading is tourism in ancient Rome and Greece. In Asia Minor and Egypt, the pyramids are marked with many inscriptions of Roman tourists. Nearer home, they toured Sicily and they frequented the resorts which dotted Italian seaboard from Ostia past Antium. Nearly for 400 years of Roman Empire as a tourist destination was unchallenged. As the Roman Empire declined, important new streams of new destinations could be seen. Jerusalem, which in Nero's time had been thronged for the Passover by 2 million Jewish visitors, and it became another tourist destination. Later, it became pilgrimage centers for Christians. Such travelling to holy places became one of the staples of tourist traffic. Jerusalem, Rome and Canterbury became the holy places for Christians as Mecca for Muslims. Likewise, many places became tourist pilgrimage destinations all over the world. Travel in ancient Mediterranean for reasons akin to modern days, tourism was well documented by historical sources. In ancient Greece, many people would travel every year to visit a series of festivals and games, including Olympic game. Travel was also common for Magna Gracela. They are the areas in southern Italy which was extensively populated by Greeks. In the 5th century CE, although Herodotus was credited by Cicero as the father of history, the work of Pausanias has contributed substantially to the travel literature. Mr. Pausanias wrote his 10 volumes about the description of architecture, mythology, art and history associated with different regions of Greece. Around the same time, the 7 wonders of ancient world, referring to extraordinary buildings in a classified antiquity, were listed in number of documents for Hellenic travelers. Third one, early travel by oceans and roads. Out of early voyages, those who travel through oceans are electrifying. Small dugout canoes, not more than 40 feet in length, were used for voyages from Southeast Asia to Marquesas Islands and the Society Islands. About 500 CE, Polynesians from Society Islands travelled to Hawaii, a stretch exceeding 2000 miles with hardly anything in the form of navigation facilities. It was perhaps carried out by conforming to the position of the sun and the stars, ocean billows and tides, clouds and bird flights. This type of ocean travel during those days indeed is amazing, especially in view of the problems of drinking water and food supplies. In the ancient cradle of Western civilization, trade, commerce, religion, health and education were the main motives for travel. The recorded history of Old Testaments is full of plentiful citations of caravans and traders. Early roads. The invention of wheel led to the development of a heavy wagon that could be drawn by a pair of oxen or onagers. Onagers are a type of wild ass. A walker or an animal needs only a track, but a vehicle needs a road. There were not many early roads that could take wheel traffic. A king of Ur bragged that he went from Nippur to Ur, a distance of 100 miles, and back in a day in 2000 BC. This indicates that the existence of very good roads in those days only. Pavements were almost non-existing until the time of Hittites, who paved 1/3 of the road between their capital and a nearby sanctuary to carry heavily loaded wagons on festivals. Even then, there were chariots and light horse drawn carts invented for wars rolled over the country side on dirt roads. Roads were better on the islands to Crete, where the Minoans flourished from 2000 BC to 1500 BC. In Greece, roads were usually one lane, although some roads were 12 feet wide, making it for two-way traffic possible. These roads were mainly used by military, government officials and the caravans. The Assyrians, like the Romans, realized that roads were basic necessary for moving chariots. As their empire expanded from Mediterranean in the west to the Gulf in the east, the Assyrians improved their roads mainly for military movements. The Epic of Gilgamesh recounts the travel of Sumerian king who was given a direction by a deity. This is another to credit the Sumerians as the pioneers of travel industry. Thus, the history of road development is related to the concentration of population in powerful cities. The Alexander the Great found well developed roads in India in 326 BC. The Romans started building wide roads in 150 BC. The roads were surveyed using a cross staff hung with plumb bobs. Soldiers and other workers dug the road, and then stones and concretes were evenly placed. Paving stones were then laid on the top, and highway was edged with curbstones and contoured to a sloping crown to shed the rainwater. By the time Emperor Trajan, who ruled from 98 BC to 117 CE, the Roman roads consisted of about 5,000 miles. The Roman Empire was extended from Scotland to Germany in the north and up to Egypt in the south. The Roman could travel about 100 miles per day using horse-drawn chariots. They journeyed to see famous temples in the Mediterranean areas, particularly the pyramids and the monuments of Egypt. Greece and Asia Minor were other popular destinations. The Roman combinations of empire, roads, wealth and leisure attracted large number of tourists. It also created a demand for accommodation and food. This led to the development of hospitality industry. Roman tourists went to different destinations for sightseeing. They employed guides, used guidebooks and bought souvenirs. The only guidebook to survive from ancient time till today is a guidebook of Greece. This book is written in 160 BC by a Greek by name Pausanias. This makes a milestone in the history of tourism. Next is the Silk Roads. The Silk Route was a creation of ancient period. Expanding across more than 12,000 miles from Mediterranean Sea to the Pacific Oceans, it was the world's longest main trade route linking the great civilization of China, India, Persia, Mesopotamia, Egypt and Rome. The rulers built spectacular palaces, mosques, churches, temples and other structures. This shows that the modern tourism finds its root during ancient periods only. Fourth one, tourism in ancient India. Travelling was a common feature in ancient India. Indian tourism has a significant past. Even before Aryans appeared in India about 5000 years back, Indus Valley civilization thrived in India. Archaeological evidences have been a testimony for the material prosperity of Indus people, which established its trade link with Iran, Eastern Africa and Mesopotamia. Arthashastra, written by Kautilya in the 3rd century BC, describes the importance of travel to the state. It also provides different types of vehicles for travel and the classification of roads. This gives a glimpse of travel and tourism in ancient India. The Mauryan Empire was well known for providing good facilities for the travellers. The Grand Trunk Road was built by Mauryans. Later Sher Shah improved it with stone towers travel. Infrastructure like caravans, chariots and dharmashala were common. Wells were dug and trees were planted to provide shade to the travellers. Security pickets were placed at convenient distances in order to provide security to the travellers. Arthashastra also gives details of passport as early as 3rd century BC. It mentions that there was a governmental department to look into foreigners. Passport or mudra was essential for all travellers. Those who were not in possession of mudra were fined 12 panas. In addition, travellers were required to get themselves checked at various points en route. Mudras had a stamp of Mudradhyaksha, a high government official in charge of mudra. Vivitadhyaksha, a local officer, checked the mudras of travels en route. The main purpose of travelling were education and pilgrimage. Even during the Vedic period, students went far off places in search of gurus or teachers. Gurus also extended hospitality to their students by allowing them to stay in their ashramas. The students were supplied food free of cost. What we find educational tourism at present can be traced to Vedic period. A large number of students from different countries came to ancient universities like Nalanda and Takshashila for education. According to Xaunzang, a Chinese traveller, the university at Nalanda provided free training for more than 10,000 students drawn from different countries of the world. Similarly, a large number of pilgrims visited holy places like Kashi, Varanasi, Rishikesh, Hardwar, Himalayas, etc. Even during the period of Ramayana and Mahabharata, both educational and pilgrimage stories were mentioned. For example, it is mentioned that Sri Balarama, the elder brother of Lord Krishna, went on a Tirthayatra, a pilgrimage tour, to wash his sin of killing a cow. During the days of Roman Empire, travel facilities in India were of high order. Trade flowed freely between India and Rome. When the Alexander the Great reached India, he found well-maintained roads lined with green trees, wells for drinking water to travellers, security system to travellers, and rest houses. The Greek historians recorded that men travelled in chariots, bullock carts, on elephants, camels, horses, and oxen. Emperor Ashok's emissaries travelled to Sri Lanka, earlier known as Ceylon, East Asia, to spread the message of Lord Buddha. Perhaps the earliest travellers from distant land to India were Persian traders. Evidence of caravans from Persia visiting India lies engraved in the inscriptions during the period of Persian King Darius. During the rule of Guptas, there was free access to the port along the western coast. There are references of many known Persians who visited India for trade and commerce. Great travellers from many countries visited India during ancient times. India is a wonderland for the rest of the world from the ancient period. Many tourists from different countries visited India in different periods. The spread of Buddhism doctrine from India to China during the 1st century CE triggered a profusion of cross-cultural exchanges. The travel of Buddhist monks and pilgrims increased the interaction between India and China. Chinese pilgrims played a key role in the cultural exchanges between India and China. Faxian, Xaunzang and Yijing were among hundreds of Chinese monks who made pilgrimage in ancient periods. Saint Thomas, a disciple of Jesus Christ, came to India in the 1st century CE. Xaunzang visited India around 633 CE. His main mission was to collect ancient Buddhist scriptures and translate them into Chinese language. Apart from these travellers, during the era of Gupta rule, the caravans of Persians visited India for commerce and trade. There is also a mention of cultural exchange between Persians and Indians. References have also been made to the influence of Persian customs in the court of Chandra Gupta Maurya. Emperor Ashok the Great travelled widely in his eagerness to spread the doctrine of Buddhism through his travel. Emperor Ashok had erected special memorials in a number of places like Saranath and Gaya. Sri Harsha was another emperor who travelled widely. The Emperor Sri Harsha was also greatly influenced by Buddhism. He also built a number of monasteries, temples, dharmashalas and rest houses for pilgrims. At that time, religion played a crucial role in travel. Some other important travellers who travelled to India are Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Marco Polo, Benjamin of Tudela, Ibn Battuta, Francis of Friar, etc. Later on, in 16th and 17th centuries, many more European missionaries travelled to India in search of knowledge and adventures. The first great sailor to do westward circumnavigation of the world was Francis Drake, who knitted by Queen Elizabeth I in the year 1581. From 1768 to 1779, Captain James Cook visited India through the long voyage. Fifth one, tourism in ancient China. Several tourism history scholars decry the Eurocentricity of writings about the history of tourism. Most notable of these is Trevor Schofield of the University of Tasmania, who states the emperors of China had ministers for travel 4000 years ago, well before imperial Rome and Herodotus. Therefore, this is a place to move behind Chaura's pilgrimage to Canterbury and Marco Polo's venture from Venice. It goes further back in time to explore other civilizations and their histories of travel besides. The histories of pilgrimage travel to countries such as India, China, Iran, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, Myanmar and other places predates much before European travel history. Inns and hospitality industry in these countries predate Europeans' examples. Schofield and Leon in their article Tourism Development and Cultural Policies in China reports that one of the main features of China's domestic tourism lies in the traditions about travel heritage sites established over 4000 years ago. Conclusion. Always, man has been moving from place to place in search of food, shelter and safety. Paleolithic evidence suggests that, given a right environment, man prefers to live in one place. The Phoenicians were probably the first real travelers in the modern sense, as they went from place to place as travelers and traders. Almost at the same time, trade and travel developed in India, where the wheels and money were introduced during Mohenjo Daro civilization about 4000 years ago. The practice of travel were the oldest tradition in the world, the motives being religion and trade.